Ladies and gentlemen, Tumblr got something right. There is a third gender. Cuck. We've heard of mansplaining, but unfortunately men are overrepresented in the media. We need more representation for cucks. So get ready to hear some cucksplaining from some of the most notorious cucks on YouTube. Steve Shives is a sad excuse for a human being. He used to be an actual man, but was then beaten to a cuck by his wife. Essentially, he was emotionally castrated. But anyway, this isn't going to be like my other two episodes. Steve's stupidity, surprisingly enough, isn't as self-evident. Steve's a little harder to deal with, because unlike some other cucks, he actually has some skill at making arguments left over from when he actually was rational. And in this video, he makes some incredibly misleading arguments about why, as his video is titled, jokes aren't jokes. Right, Steve? Just like a chair isn't a chair, a rock isn't a rock, an open-faced chicken sandwich is not an open-faced chicken sandwich. Nothing is real. So I'm going to do a full-on response video. So get ready to hear some of the most pathetic cucksplaining of your life. Sorry to break it to you, man, but that's such a bad intro. That's even worse than my intro.
It was just a joke. How many times have we heard that? How many times have we said that when we're trying to defend ourselves against someone who takes offense at something we've said? We say, relax, it's only a joke. Or when someone tells a joke that really, really pisses somebody off, they say to the offended party, hey, chill out. What's wrong? You can't take a joke? You really need to learn to take a joke. How many times have we said that?
I don't know. Whenever we tell jokes these days, no thanks to idiots like you.
When someone got pissed off at us for some light remark, or what we thought was a light remark that we made, they get really pissed off at us. They get in our face. They call us an asshole. We say, God, can't you take a joke? Well, this video is going to be about why we shouldn't do that. Why that is a bullshit response when someone is offended by a joke.
Why, Steve? What else is anyone supposed to say? That's literally the only correct response. If it's a joke, then it's a joke.
Either a joke that we tell or a joke that someone else tells. It's not a valid argument to say it's just a joke, therefore you have no right to be upset about it.
No one ever says no one has the right to be upset about a joke. You can be upset about anything you want. That doesn't automatically make your criticism valid. It doesn't usually mean anything that you're upset.
But before I get too far into it, I want to call your attention to the description box of this video where you will find links to two articles. One is an article by Jessica Goldstein, which is in large part an interview with Jason Steed, who made a series of tweets on this subject last week, and then the other is a blog article by John Scalzi, and both of these articles refer primarily to the Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton Second Amendment comments.
Oh no, wait, no. You're not going to talk about something that's not a joke, right? It's debatable that what Trump said is a joke. I think he was serious about it, and I'll explain that later. But most people didn't take that as a joke. I thought you were talking about jokes, Steve.
And then the excuse that was offered that, Trump was just joking. Both of these articles are excellent. They articulate feelings.
It's not about feelings, Steve. It's about the facts, and the facts indicate that Trump wasn't joking. But if you're implying Trump should be punished for threatening Hillary as much as I hate Trump, who you're the left-wing equivalent of, by the way, Steve, I'd have to disagree with you there. What he said technically does fall under freedom of speech. He didn't make a direct threat of violence. He did get awfully close to reaching the First Amendment, though.
And opinions and insights on this issue that I share, but that are articulated in a great more detail and much more eruditely than I'm going to be able to offer you in this video. This video owes a great debt to both of those articles and to the people involved in creating them. So I highly recommend that you go read both of those articles, the Jessica Goldstein article and the John Scalzi article, linked in the description box below. Now, as I said, the recent incident at a Donald Trump rally last week, if you're watching this video on the day that it is published, where Trump was talking to a crowd at a rally in North Carolina about how Hillary Clinton wants to abolish the Second Amendment, which is it's a scare tactic that conservatives have been using for decades. That has been one of their most relied upon tactics, to try to scare up votes from conservatives, to say the Democrats are coming for your guns. And Donald Trump repeated this trope before his in front of his audience at the rally in North Carolina. And then he decided to add something a little extra to it, where he said, quote, Hillary wants to abolish, essentially, the Second Amendment. If she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks. Although the Second Amendment people, maybe there is. I don't know. Now, Trump and his campaign denied that that statement was intended as a threat. Trump said, and many of his mouthpieces have said, he was talking about the Second Amendment people going out to the polls and voting to defeat Hillary.
See, this is why I think Trump wasn't joking. If that's his defense, which is a terrible defense, by the way, then I'd think he was serious. Otherwise, he could have said, I was just joking. So why are you talking about this again, Steve? Is this whole video just going to be you mistaking things that aren't jokes for jokes? So your video title might as well be Things That Aren't Jokes.
To stop her from appointing judges. He wasn't meaning to imply that people should try to assassinate her. Don't be ridiculous. It was actually Paul Ryan who said, well, maybe Trump was just joking, or it sounds to me like Trump was just making a bad joke. And to his credit, Paul Ryan then immediately followed that up by saying, I don't think that's something you should joke about, meaning political assassination.
I disagree with this completely. You can joke about serious things. That's the whole point. Jokes wouldn't be funny if all we joked about was puppies and rainbows all day. I never understand people who say that you can't joke about a serious topic. It makes no sense. And it's not a valid scenario, Steve. Only a few people, not even Trump himself, said Trump was joking. But you put that in there so you can manipulate people into censoring jokes.
But he did put that idea out there. Trump was only joking. And everybody should just relax. Because it was a joke. It was, it was a joke in bad taste, but it was only a joke. Everybody should just calm down. And this is one of the two scenarios in which we hear this excuse being made. The first, as in the Trump situation, is when something that, in the interpretation of many people who heard it, was not originally a joke, is reframed as a joke, under the assumption that if people can be convinced that it was a joke and that it is then taken as a joke, then that absolves the person who said it of any responsibility for what was said. And it takes away, it pulls the rug out from under people who are offended by it. But the excuse is also used in response to people getting offended at things which are obviously jokes. And that is the second scenario in which it is commonly heard, when someone tells a joke that everybody recognizes as a joke.
5 minutes and 4 seconds in this video, and only now do you get to talking about actual jokes. Why am I not surprised?
But people are still offended by it. They are often told, usually by the joke teller or, by other people who thought that the joke was funny, hey, it's only a joke. Don't get all worked up about it. The assumption is that it's a joke, therefore we shouldn't hold it to the same standard of other forms of speech. It's a joke. It wasn't meant to be taken seriously. Therefore, if you, as a person who heard the joke, are taking it seriously, then you are somehow being unfair to the person who told the joke.
Yes, Steve, you just described exactly how jokes work. They're not meant to be taken seriously. If you misinterpret a joke, that's called being wrong. So why are you arguing about this, Steve?
Now, why do I say that this is a bullshit excuse? Because I don't accept the premise that there is any such thing as just joking.
Why, Steve? Why? Is everything anyone says supposed to be taken literally? That makes no sense. Let me give you an example, Steve. Well, you just described how jokes work. You said it in a sarcastic tone. That means you meant the opposite of what you said. So why don't the same rules apply for jokes? Also, what you believe doesn't affect the way the world actually works. Do you really expect people to cater to your needs just because you don't believe in jokes?
And you should also understand, when I say that, I am also of the belief that all speech is political speech.
What? That makes no sense. So when I talk about, breathing, is that political? When I inhale air, am I doing it for a political cause? Cucksplain this to me, Steve. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, so I better see some good evidence. That sounds an awful lot like something someone we know once said.
Because when we say things in a social context, in a political context, whether we intend them to have a particular meaning or not, our speech is expressed in a context where it can take on those meanings. It can be heard in certain ways. It can have implications that maybe we weren't aware of or we didn't intend, but those implications are there nonetheless.
So you mean that when someone analyzes your speech, it could possibly mean something other than what you intended to say, and that something is political? The problem with that argument is that different words and different phrases can have multiple meanings, and not all of them are the correct meaning. For example, if I say, I bought the flour, it could mean I bought powdered wheat or a plant with petals. However, if I meant powdered wheat, that is the correct meaning. It doesn't mean anything else. There is such a thing as being incorrect, Steve.
And there's just no such thing as non-political speech.
Okay, my fat cat just fell asleep on the couch. Tell me how that's political, Steve.
There's no such thing as saying something and then being able to, exempt yourself from the consequences of something you said by saying, oh, it's just a joke.
No one is saying that, Steve. I hate to say it, but that's a total straw man. People are only saying that jokes shouldn't be offensive because they're jokes. But if someone does take offense at a joke, that's their prerogative.
Another commonly expressed idea in these sorts of conversations, when someone takes offense at something that someone else has said, whether that thing is a joke or not, is people will respond by saying, well, you don't have a right to not be offended. And that's true. Like, I completely endorse that statement. You do not have a right to not be offended, right? But there is also no right to expect other people to not be offended by something that you have said or done. Nor is there a right for you to demand that people who are offended by something you've said or done to keep silent about it, or to only react to it in a certain way.
Who is saying this, Steve? Who? Give me some names. No one is saying this.
Or to interpret your words or your actions in the most charitable way possible. You have no right to expect that of other people, especially if your words or actions demonstrate a disregard on your part for them and for their feelings.
The point of jokes aren't to insult people. They're to make other people laugh. They're to make other people happy.
So when Donald Trump says something irresponsible that could be interpreted as a suggestion for others to assassinate his political rival, reframing his statement as a joke, or perhaps he intended it as a joke. John Scalzi, one of the authors of one of the articles I mentioned at the top of this video, actually is willing to accept that Trump was joking.
We've already been through this, Steve. Stop bringing it up. You're trying to imply that since Trump wasn't joking, no one is joking. Stop being so misleading.
That he meant it as a joke. That's fine. Whether you believe he intended it as a joke or whether you believe he is now trying to reframe it as a joke in order to get away with something or to absolve himself of responsibility doesn't make any difference to me. Because if it was a joke, it does nothing to relieve him of his responsibility. Joking or not, he said something that to the ears of many people was implying that the death of Hillary Clinton would be a good thing.
Actually, I wouldn't be too bothered if it happened myself. And it doesn't matter what other people think if someone says something. It's about the original intent.
That we should hope for, and that perhaps we should even work to realize. That's the problem with what Trump said. Not whether or not he was joking, not whether or not he meant it.
No, that's exactly what matters. Context means everything, Steve.
And something similar goes on when someone tells a joke that is at the expense of a particular group of people. When they tell a sexist joke that is at the expense of women, or a racist joke that is at the expense of black folks.
Why can't it be the other way around? Or is it not offensive when the jokes are against white people or against men?
Or people of color of some other category.
Man, you're so lame. You're confused by even your own SJW buzzwords. You know what's really offensive, Steve? The phrase people of color. You know why? Because it sounds exactly like colored people. You know that phrase that was written on the separate drinking fountains they had for black people?
Or LGBTQ folk. They're presenting a premise in telling the joke that the targeted group of people, whatever that group may be, is worthy of being laughed at.
So we should get just as offended when it's about white people or straight people or men, right? Right, Steve?
Is strange or odd or ridiculous or inferior in some way to the teller of the joke and to the audience. When someone tells a racist joke, for instance, and people laugh at the joke, then the joke teller and the audience are entering into agreement that the premise of the joke is valid. If someone says, where's the best place to hide money from a black person? in their work shoes, and then you laugh at that joke, you are agreeing with the teller of the joke that the premise of the joke, that black people are inherently lazy, or at least inherently lazier than other people, is valid.
No, the joke's about a stereotype, not about actual black people. The joke could even be a self-deprecating joke. The person could be joking about themselves being stupid and racist enough to think that. Because guess what, Steve? Most white people do not think black people are inherently lazy. Sorry to break it to you, Steve. And it's a joke. Telling a racist joke does not make you a racist. If you joke about black people because you actually think they're inferior, then you are a racist. But if you joke about them in order to be funny, as I imagine most people telling racist jokes do, that doesn't necessarily make you a racist. Jokes aren't meant to be taken seriously.
Because if you didn't think that was a valid premise, if you didn't think that the joke teller had a point, then you wouldn't think the joke was funny. Because the humor of the joke turns on that point.
No, the joke revolves around a stereotype. What if I said, how many men does it take to screw in a light bulb? One, they'll screw anything. That's a sexist joke. And you know why it's funny? Because it's based off a stereotype that men think about sex all the time. It doesn't mean that I hate men, and it doesn't mean that I think all men think about sex all the time. I certainly don't. Well, okay, some of the time. You see what I mean, Steve?
If you reject the premise, then the joke doesn't work. And if you think the joke works, then it means you have accepted the premise of the joke. And that is ultimately the problem, is that the joke teller and the people in the audience who accept the joke and find it funny are agreeing on a premise that is bigoted and ignorant and dehumanizing of a particular group of people.
It's only dehumanizing if the intent is to dehumanize a group of people, which is usually not the case when people make these sort of jokes. Stop taking everything literally, Steve.
You're creating an environment where you and your audience, if you are the joke teller, you and your audience are coming into agreement about the inferiority or the unacceptability or the subhumanity of the group that are the butt of that joke. And the mere fact that it is a joke changes nothing. The fact that you as the joke teller are hoping for laughter as a response from your audience rather than applause or nods of agreement or some other reaction changes nothing. When a joke teller says to someone who was offended by one of their jokes that they need to just relax because it's only a joke, what they're really saying is that they'd like to be able to say offensive things without having to hear about it.
No, people just don't want people to attack them about something that they said that they didn't really mean. And no one wants to be called a racist or a sexist over a joke. Those are serious and hurtful labels. You have the right to get offended over something, but that doesn't make your taking offense justified.
They'd like to be able to conduct that transaction between themselves and the receptive members of their audience without anyone from the outside coming in and calling bullshit on it. That's what they're demanding when they say, relax, it's only a joke.
No one is demanding anything, Steve, except for you. You're the one who's demanding that jokes should be taken seriously.
They're basically demanding either your acceptance or your silence.
No, they're informing the person that it was a joke. And what's wrong with that? Considering you want everyone to accept you, can't you accept the people telling the jokes that make you get all butthurt?
In response to their joke. They're also saying that the feelings of the offended person don't matter to them.
Exactly, Steve. Someone else's feelings shouldn't matter to someone who's trying to be funny. If anything, they should just tell the person whether the joke was funny or not. If it wasn't funny, the person telling the joke will probably understand that. However, making a big deal out of it going, my feelings, isn't going to change anything.
And the feelings of the offended person don't have to matter to them. They're completely within their rights to not care about the feelings of anyone who reacts in an unwelcome way to their joke.
Exactly, Steve. That's the point I was trying to make. Finally, you actually started making some sense.
But the problem is when they say it's just a joke, or they say you need to learn how to take a joke, they're not just disregarding the feelings of that person. They are asking that person for something. They're asking that person for their understanding, for their charity, for their acceptance, for their tolerance, for their silence. They're asking them for something. They are demanding a particular response that the joke teller has deemed acceptable.
No, Steve. Like I said, you're the only one who demands anything.
To his joke, from the person whose feelings they have just made quite clear they completely have disregarded. They're saying, I don't care how you were affected by what I said, and here's what I want from you. So what is the best way to respond when someone is offended by a joke that you've told? Well, I think ideally you should listen to the person who is offended. if they're interested in talking to you. I mean, if they just get angry and say, "Oh, fuck you, and fuck your joke," and they just walk away from you, then there's not much you can do. But if they're willing to tell you what it is about your joke that they found offensive, you should be willing to listen to them.
Okay, that's fair, but if you don't agree with that, then you don't have to do anything. You're asking people to change because of other people's feelings about jokes, Steve.
And try to understand from their perspective why they feel the way they feel, what it was about your joke that they didn't like. And you know what? If you listen to them and you give them a fair hearing and you decide that you didn't do anything wrong, if you decide that their offense is not justified, that they are being unreasonable, then I think you should just let them be offended. Because they have a right to be offended, whether you think they're being reasonable or not. They have a right to react to your joke in any way that they react to it. And you don't have a right to demand any particular reaction from them. But you do have the right to not listen to them. So if you ask them to explain why they took offense to your joke and they explain it and you don't agree with it or you don't get it and you don't want to hear about it anymore, you have the right not to listen to them. You don't have the right to demand that they don't say anything. But you do have the right to choose not to hear them, to choose not to listen. Although personally, I think if you're that bothered by people taking offense at something that you've said, the best thing you can do is to try to understand why they were offended. And given that you care about their reaction, to adjust accordingly.
Oh, you mean censoring the way you talk so you can be a good party member? Yeah, I'm not gonna do that, Steve.
Whatever that means for you. Maybe that means coming up with better jokes or finding more sophisticated ways to joke about certain things. Or maybe that means deciding that there are certain things you're not going to joke about.
Like I said, no subject or joke is off limits from telling. It only matters whether it's funny or not. Oh my god, Steve!
Or maybe it just means deciding that there are certain jokes that you're just not going to tell. And for many of us, I think that might be the best solution. And it might be an especially good idea if you're running for president of the United States.
Back to Trump saying something that was not a joke again. Is it just me or are we going around in circles, Steve?
Just saying. Hey folks, hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And also please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
And it turns out that your outro is even worse than your intro. I guess your wife must have designed it for you. Anyway, that was some hardcore cucksplaining right there. I hope none of you guys died from smashing your head up against the wall. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching. Feel the